Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 8 of Brand Studio Live. I'm Ramit Arora and I have a brand new set of brand masters with me today. Hosted jointly by the HT Brand Studio and DMA Asia, Brand Studio brings together the country's top CXOs to talk about the hottest topics in marketing. In the process, we not only end up learning from the best, but also being inspired by them. Episode 8 marks the Mumbai chapter of Brand Studio Live, where we've moved out of the HT newsroom to the haloed grounds on which companies and brands have set their trajectories over the years. The BSC, formerly known as the Bombay Stock Exchange. A big thank you to the BSC for hosting us today. Without further delay then, let's get started with today's episode. Steve Jobs once very famously said, a brand is simply trust. And this has been proven across years, across decades, in many researches. And a recent survey I was reading, conducted by PwC, said that 1 in 3 people in India ranked trust in brand as among the top 3 reasons that influence their purchase decision. Building brand trust in the digital age, however, comes with lots of challenges and opportunities. There's a deluge of information and misinformation. And just so many questions in all our minds as consumers on how online businesses collect our data and how they use it. And then there's the whole challenge of brand safety and safe purchases. Yet many of us find it hard to navigate the purchasing process if there aren't enough reviews available on the internet. So what's the playing field for brands? We're going to hear more about this from leaders from the financial service space in this episode, a sector that in my view is particularly looking to gain trust for brands, for products and for their businesses. Very happy to introduce my first guest today, Asha Kharga, Chief Marketing Officer of Axis Bank. Previously with Unilever, where she held a wide variety of roles, Asha is an innovative marketing professional who's passionate about building brands and nurturing diversity, and an old friend. Asha believes that brands can spark conversation and relies on consumer insight to drive marketing strategy. It's a real pleasure to have you here, Asha. Asha, if I was to pick 2 sectors that have the absolute onerous responsibility to gain brand trust, I would pick news and banking. So it's very fitting that exactly we're having this chat and kicking off this episode. We're navigating a world of misinformation, and there's lots of misinformation at many levels of digital literacy, language barriers, structural issues. Yet these are very exciting times. This is exactly what all of us dreamt of as advertising people, as marketing people. And you've actually traversed advertising, FMCG, and now banking. How's the transition been? Does trust remain key to this equation as you move from sector to sector, FMCG to banking, or is it a different ball game altogether now?
So firstly, Rami, thank you for having me over. I think we've been having this conversation for a while, and I'm really grateful, feel privileged that you've called me. So really happy to be here. When I first got the topic of brand trust, I Googled brand trust, and 1.3 billion results.
Points for Google here.
1.3 billion results in 0.43 seconds. So, I mean, that's that just goes to show, how important trust is probably the most important metric more than any functional attribute today. And if I look at my journey from HUL to Axis Bank, FMCG, or if you look at any durables, even anything tangible, yes, trust is important because finally you're consuming products, you're eating something, these are personal products, you'll be washing your hair, etc., etc. But banking, firstly, is a service. And secondly, you're finally dealing with money. And therefore, if people are actually, trusting an institution with their life savings, these are senior citizens, they could be homemakers, they could be chief wage earners, just leaving that sum of money with you, and therefore the responsibility and the trust just goes up several notches. And even if you look at the rupee, the claim on the rupee note, I promise to pay the bearer of the sum of rupees 500. I cannot think of any product which would say, I promise to give you the whitest clothes, or I promise to give you the shiniest hair. So I think the magnitude of trust in banking is of a different level. And every day that we come to work, we really have to be extremely cognizant of that. And that is one of the biggest differences for me between FMCG and banking.
3 mantras for building brand trust from where you stand today?
Actually, let me, before I go into the 3 mantras, I'd just like to share a bit more about, in the banking context, what I have learned, which has actually been quite different and unexpected, because when I came in, everything was about digital, fintech. Fintech is going to take over the world, and banks are really, really at low on the innovation front, etc. But one of my biggest learnings, and I'll start with a story. I met a consumer who walked into the bank. He had an issue with his mobile wallet, with his e-wallet. I won't name the brand, but he didn't know where to go. He said, there is an email ID and there is a customer number, but I came into the, when I walk into a bank, I have a face. I can discuss if there is an issue with respect to my money. And therefore, even with having one of the best mobile apps in the country, we are rated 4.9 on Google Play. Again, I'm plugging Google, but sorry about that, unintentional, and the app. But the larger question is not the app. The larger thing is that this month we will open our 4,000th branch. And that's one of the biggest learnings in this category, that you cannot undermine the power of branches. And even while we continue to invest in digital, we will continue to invest in the physical too.
Trust in the human being across the...
Absolutely, absolutely. No denying in the context of money.
Does that change as you deal with millennials?
I think universally, the fact that we are actually going digital and dealing with technology, when you have a problem, when you want to discuss, is it worth taking a home loan for 20 years? Should I be prepaying the loan? Can I get a better rate of interest? I don't think you can do that conversation on digital. Of course, we look at, digital is really to aid, the process and actually get faster processing, etc. But really, I think it's one of the most important factors in building trust, the human quotient.
We'll open it up to some questions from the other brand masters now.
Yeah. Hey, Asha.
Hi.
So one important question, since we're speaking about brand trust in the age of the internet, you've used celebrities in the past specifically for your bank.
Right.
You use them as the face of the brand.
Right.
Do you think using celebrities helps build the brand trust, or at some point of time it's actually detrimental because you're just trying to get a well-known person to speak something which the person personally may not even actually endorse, right?
Right.
So, I'd like to just share a bit about the history of Axis. The fact is that we started as UTI Bank, and even till around 5 years ago, before Deepika became the brand ambassador, we were considered to be a public sector bank. And I think one thing that she has definitely done for us is to really place us firmly as an agile private sector player. And there's no denying that today, for example, we come with the top 3, and that was not the case 5 years ago, where we were seen as closer to a public sector player and not so much a private sector player. So that's one. 2, I think we have used her on a category which is credit cards, and which is all about indulgences and experiences. And I think she really lends herself well to that, because she's somebody who appeals to the millennial. And finally, you are asking people to do things which they're most comfortable with, which is shopping, dining, eating out, and just ensuring that Axis is the preferred choice. So that's the second one. And she's brought in a lot of vibrancy and youthfulness to the brand. And I think in that sense, she has done well for us.
Yeah, hi Asha. So wonderful, good insights.
What I want to ask is, your brand would have offline customers and online existing customers. So do you see, or if you have evaluated the extent of trust which an online customer places in the brand is lower or same like offline customers, and if it is on a lower side or comfort is low in online segment, so anything different that your brand is doing to building up that trust for the online segment?
Okay. I personally feel it doesn't matter whether the customer is offline or online. Customers are customers. If there is trust in the brand, they'll come to you through either channel. I think there is a lot of information out there, and I think that behind the anonymity of laptops, there is a lot of information put. And I think, therefore, I really believe in the power of our 60,000 employees. And the connect that, in fact, Axis stands out for the relationship that it has with its customers. And I think the strong word of mouth that builds with people on ground, you know, especially with senior citizens, the fact that we have relationships with men in uniform, all of that goes a long way to build brand trust. And I also believe that trust is an ongoing journey. We have, you know, we have challenges along the way, but doing the right thing every day really makes a difference. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Asha. That
I
was,
just want to say,
yeah.
I just want to say one last thing,
Yes,
is
please.
that I think it's more important to be trusted than to be loved, especially for financial services. And you know, and I think if we are able to, if you're able to create that trust, I think we do a job that makes us feel proud. Yeah.
More important to be trusted than to be loved.
Yes,
Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
That was wonderful.
Thank you.
My next guest is Pankaj Gupta, Chief Marketing Officer and Head Strategic Alliances, Credit Life Specialty Sales and Government Business at HDFC Life Insurance Company Limited. Pankaj has been associated with HDFC Life since November 2014. In the past, he's been with organizations like ICICI Bank, TCS and the Citigroup. Welcome, Pankaj. It's wonderful to have you here. Quickly getting to our discussion, a key ingredient in the trust equation is advocacy. And advocacy can come from many places. It can come from friends, it can come from family. Asha pointed out it can come from trusted employees, it can come from a workforce. Talk to us a little bit about advocacy and how it sort of builds into the trust equation, and what's your mantra to build advocacy for brand.
If I were to talk about advocacy, I would deconstruct it into three component pieces. One of the most important things, in my opinion, to build advocacy is transparency. The image for transparency that you have in the customer's mind. Another very important factor is customer centricity. If you are known as a brand that is customer centric and that has done things for the customers which has gone beyond what they would normally expect, you would expect more customer advocacy to be coming from your customer set itself. And the third big ingredient to have customer advocacy built in comes from having an image of reliability. It is particularly important for a brand like ours in the financial services space, in life insurance, which is a very long-term oriented product. And these three component pieces, each one of them has their own nuances. For example, when we are talking about reliability, what does reliability mean for the customer in life insurance? It is the sheer promise of saying that we are going to be around after 20 or 30 years when we need to honor any commitments that we may have made to you, but they have to be honored for your kith and kin if you are not around also. Similarly, if you are talking about transparency, transparency also cuts across many different components. For example, when I am saying that I am selling X product to you for a certain need, then I am transparent in telling you that this is the product that is going to solve this problem for you. And if that perception is built in the customer's mind, you will again enjoy the advocacy coming from your customer itself. So these are the big pieces that I believe impact advocacy from the point of view of a financial services brand. Now there are other aspects as well of customer advocacy. One of the things that we have done, and it is in the context of the earlier question about using brand ambassadors for the organizations and whether it helps or does not help, What we have done is we have taken real life situations from the world around us and how they link to our core brand, our core product, and the solutions that those products give in the customer's life. For example, we have been using Lisa Ray for our cancer and health campaigns for a very long period of time. She is a cancer survivor herself. And when you see such brand ambassadors coming and having a relevance for the customer beyond just their celebrity status, it makes a difference. Our latest campaign, which is on bounce back, that has used Darpan Inani, who got blind at the age of 3, and in spite of the setback that he had at that point of time in his life, he went on and to become a chess champion. And this bounce back again links back to what our product is solving for the customer. So when you have an integrated thought process about your customer, when your communication, when your product, when your the celebrities and the ads that you are using to communicate the brand message, if all of them are consistent with each other and your product is actually doing for the customer what it says it is doing for the customer, you build advocacy all around.
Do you measure advocacy? And if you do, tell us a little bit about what that metric is.
So one of the things that we have started focusing very heavily is on customer satisfaction. Now it is a more, I would say, it comes before advocacy and it comes even before things like net promoter score. However, we are transitioning into a net promoter type of a score from a seaside type of a measure. One big thing that we have done is that we are trying to identify each single interaction that a customer could possibly have with our brand, and in each of those moments of truth, how close to that actual incidence can we measure that satisfaction, and how that can flow back into an intelligence into our processes on what it means for us to change our processes so that the customer experience the next time is better. And actually we are able to identify very nuanced aspects. For example, in a certain geography for a certain product, the customers are not very happy. So those things, if you are able to work on and find out the root causes and involve the entire might of the organization cutting across departments, our ability to measure advocacy and to build advocacy further into the future goes up. Another big change with that we did recently is that entire process of measuring customer satisfaction, we moved online and digital. So earlier what used to happen is there is a customer interaction that would happen, and after 1 week somebody would call from a call center and the customer would try to remember what transaction we are talking about and what is the feedback for, and he would probably have forgotten a couple of nuances about that interaction. Now as soon as the transaction is over, our engine is able to trigger a feedback mechanism process so that you are as close in time to the actual incidence of the interaction to get that feedback. So our ability to build customer advocacy goes up in that scenario, because you are measuring the entire feedback process more accurately, and probably your ability to solve the issue also improves. If you are getting the feedback after 1 week and that feedback is aggregated at a certain level and the report comes after 1 month, then your entire ability to respond is probably 8 weeks too delayed. Now in the new scenario, our ability to respond is, if not hours, in days and weeks rather than months.
Though I would argue on the internet and with social media, sometimes you need to respond in seconds, because an aggrieved customer is more damaging than 100 happy customers are actually sort of rewarding.
I would absolutely agree with you. Today, the way the news items go viral or any customer experience goes viral, it is extremely important to be ever present on the digital mediums and address anything that is coming your way in real time.
I just want to just follow up on, you're on this journey of sort of building more toward from customer satisfaction towards net promoter score kind of metrics. So you're moving more and more towards these metrics. As you transition the organization going, from the old way of sort of measuring how consumers respond to sort of more and more proactive measures, tell me some of the challenges you're encountering.
So it is a journey that we are talking about here, and in my opinion it begins with the philosophy of the organization. If the philosophy of the organization is to be more customer centric, the message percolates down to everybody in the organization. Secondly, you start taking action appropriately. For example, you need a better trained workforce, you need products that are more customer friendly, You need processes that are more oriented towards customers' expectations and needs. You need resolution mechanisms that are more in real time than taking a much longer view. You need to measure things from the customer's point of view. For example, if it is a claims process, one way of measuring it from the point of time you got all the documents from the customer till the time of claim settlement. You are right from your organization's view that I did not get all the documents, so the claim was not processed. I am measuring it from that point of time. However, for the customer or your partner, it begins from the time of the actual occurrence of that incidence or the first time they informed you. What happens to the process in between? Again, it goes back to the philosophy. Do you as an organization take ownership for the entire end-to-end customer experience, or you're looking at a sub-component which is directly attributable to you? So in my opinion, taking responsibility for things beyond just what are directly attributable to you goes a long way in building that philosophy further down the line.
So a large portion of what you're saying is about having the right processes in place, having the right consumer-focused mindset in place. But as the organization itself evolves, uh, is there a lot of cultural complexity to this as well?
I would agree that there is a cultural element to this. At any point of time, you have a workforce that has been with the organization and that has been doing things in a certain way for a reasonably long period of time. For any dynamic organization which is engaged in its day-to-day business, to train the people, to orient them into a new way of thinking, to communicate the message, to make sure the message registers, it's an operational and a logistic challenge in any large situation, and that is something that we have to work through. So it is an evolution, it is a journey. As the philosophy gets more and more deeply embedded, we will keep seeing those improvements which are already visible in many of the situations.
Thank you so much, Pankaj. That was wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. My next guest, and it's an absolute privilege to welcome Shankar Jadhav, who heads strategy and marketing at the BSC and is a managing director of BSC Investments. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being our host. Shankar, can you talk to us a little bit about how the BSC, which is the world's fastest stock exchange, and that's fantastic because it's also the oldest stock exchange in Asia, has helped lay a foundation of trust in the economy, because that is really the core of what happens here. And you were telling me a little while ago that where we are sitting now is where in the erstwhile Bombay Stock Exchange, now the BSE. Once upon a time, there used to be manual trading, and so trust has always been the centerpiece of what happened in the BSE and in this wonderful hall. Talk to us a little bit.
Lasting for 145 years is a big achievement for an exchange like ours. As you said, we are world's oldest exchange, and let me tell you, it's gone through its ups and downs. But one thing that has not changed is that we are here to provide capital to the Indian economy, and people trust us. In fact, if you go, many people have asked, how do you build trust? How do you build a brand? And I tell them, if you ask the world, anyone, how's India doing? They'll ask for Sensex. In fact, many people are unaware that our building, this building that we are sitting in, is the most shown building from India the worldwide. Sensex is known to everyone. The US President, Vice President, the world's most senior people come to Mumbai and visit BSE.
Wow.
So that's one thing that we see. We also call it a temple of capital market. If you've seen that, we've got some people touching the steps of when they enter in. BSE has developed all this because there was always one thing in mind of people, that what we are doing is going to build something big. And the trust has developed because of the way we work. Over the years, we've got some ups and downs, but one thing that has always stood ground is, if there's a mistake, we make sure that that mistake is corrected, appropriate fair justice is done, and we continue with it. In fact, you were talking about banking sector. Let me give you one fact which many people ignore. If you put your money in the bank, the deposit guarantee is still 1 lakh rupees only, and it's not changed for last 2 decades or 3 decades. Whereas our deposit guarantee, if any broker or anything happens in the system, we give a guarantee up to 15 lakhs.
Wow.
The SEBI rules are so strict that if someone does a mistake, we make sure that that mistake is corrected. Every day we handle thousands of crores. And you can ask people whether they've lost anything, money because of any exchange, especially BSE. It's a big, big achievement that we have. At the same time, when technology changes, you know how technology is today. That technology has to be used to reduce the time that people take to get information. Why? Because we've noticed that trust is built if you are prompt in letting people know. In financial sector, time is of essence. We today have achieved a speed of 6 microseconds, and we show it to the people. If you see our contract note, it shows that time in nanoseconds. Besides that, one of the things that I have noticed is, as human beings, as Asha also pointed out, is that people want to be able to talk to someone, want to be able to respond. There should be a two-way communication to build trust. And today BSE is there on all social media. We use digital media quite often to get to our customers. We have an app, we have a Telegram group for instance, mutual fund. We have more than 7,000 people on it, every moment solving queries, and our teams are all night awake. I get up in the night at 2 o'clock and I see someone resolving some queries or the other. That's the kind of trust we have built in. It's all because of the people that we have.
Lovely. Congratulations on that. Our brand masters might have some questions.
How do you view taking the brand forward, and how do you retain trust and take it forward, and what are some of the challenges that you face, I mean the BSE brand faces when you're trying to build it towards the future?
BSE brand definitely faces challenges every time, because one disgruntled customer, as we talked, can speak more negative and actually feel bad than thousands of customers who are good. As you know, we have more than 2 crore investors in our system, and the toughest challenge is to ensure that whatever issues people have, concerns people have, to address in time. In fact, that's a record. I still remember when my CEO sent me a message from Chennai saying that there was a customer who complained that he did not get tea when he was at BSE here. BSE's chai is very famous, if you may be aware. And I was surprised, and we talked to them, and it seems that person was asked for tea and he said, no, I am okay. And like all millennials today do, if you say you are okay, it's all right. So now we have to still tell them that there are still people who believe that they will say okay, then you ask them 2-3 times and then they will say yes, I would like to have tea. So our biggest challenge is, how do I move my focus from the investors that were there for 100 years, who were most probably mature, conservative, and studied more and invested in stocks, to today's customers, today's investors, who are just bombarded with media. We don't know whether it's right, fake news, what is happening. How do we get them to see the truth, and how do we make sure that they read from the right sources? And our BSE website is the most visited website. So one of the challenges that we have faced is information going promptly and solving issues, and how we have solved it is make it available. If something is not available, people are concerned. In fact, if you see most of our notices, earlier we used to put one name, we have started putting 2 names. So if one person is unavailable for whatever reason, the other person is there. We put their mobile numbers there, emails there, landline numbers there. So in BSE, we have fostered a culture that people can be trusted, and if there's a problem, go to the higher level authority. So that's one thing that we've done.
Actually, you had a very interesting angle where you talked about timeliness as a source of trust. We encounter this a lot in the news business, because without timeliness, my acquisition funnel doesn't work. And without trust, my engagement and monetization funnels don't work. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you've leveraged timeliness to build trust?
I'll tell you what happens is, if you asked a question, where were you last night? If you pause, people don't trust you. We have made sure that that pause is the minimum.
Where were you last night, Rajiv?
In fact, so. Well, I think I was with you, Ramit. So that's one. Second, many people believe that marketing function is only to highlight good things about themselves. Let me tell you, in financial sector, there are lots of bad things also you have to do if something goes wrong. And we have taken a proactive lead. If there's something wrong, if there's something tough, our CEO will go on stage, have a press conference, or go to the media and speak about it. Because the best way to make sure that people don't misunderstand is get it from the horse's mouth. And in financial sector, you would see that without trust, you cannot last for 145 years. It's a built to last. and yet we have challenges. We are trying to overcome them.
Thank you so much. It's been absolutely a privilege to have you here. My next guest is Sharad Mathur, Head of Sales and Distribution, SBI General Insurance Company Limited. Sharad has 22 years of successful business management experience. He's been recognized among the 50 most talented retail professionals of India by CMO Asia and 50 most influential digital media professionals by the World Marketing Congress. Welcome, Sharad.
Thanks, Ravi.
You know, we've spoken about trust being a nucleus for companies and brands, and I think there's lots of consensus around the fact that trust as a recipe for brands and companies has been around for 200 years and it's not going away. But the world's changing. The internet is certainly changing some of the way we need to think. Social media is very exciting, but it's also a minefield. The internet has its own challenges. And as we go from the world, the conventional world, the traditional world, if I may call it that we all grew up in, or some of us grew up in, to this new world as marketeers, talk to us a little bit about the where, the what, the how, tell us the steps, the mantra, show us the road to building trust.
See, as you mentioned about conventional and current age situation, which is, more social media. So conventional, we all know, as we grew up seeing, used to be a one-way brand communication, whether television or radio or newspaper, news used to, or brand communication used to get broadcasted and it used to reach millions. And in the current age where, we talk about social media, web pages, access to information by many, it is becoming very, very clear that, the current age customer is expecting a lot of interaction and they are cherishing it, and it is becoming interactive and dynamic, and communication has become two-way now. So any customer who is visiting, social media pages of a particular brand and getting access to lots of information is, leaving a lot of queries there, so which he expects to be answered and his concerns to be addressed there and then instantly. So today's customer is making much informed decision than earlier times, where it used to be seeing a brand, using it, and then deciding whether to trust that brand or not. So nowadays it is about customer testimonies, views, reviews, and then, deciding whether to go for it or not. And once you adopt it, buy it, and start using it, then you share your experience as a user experience there. So all these things are becoming really decisive, and customer at the same time is very intelligent. He is expecting that if there is an interaction happening, so online assistant should be there at all times. So again, I draw a comparison with conventional media, where it used to be limited to schedule, that television news or newspaper, there used to be a time for that. Nowadays any customer want to know anything about it, so it is anytime, anywhere. So this situation, which is dynamic, which is two-way, is also posing a challenge. Customer expectations have to be met at all times. There could be a service related issue, there could be something good customer wants to post, there could be some ill comment. So I believe to share more views on ill comment, it is helping organizations to inculcate those shortcomings or gaps, and while repositioning the brand or rebuilding the brand, if these things are incorporated, so it gets you closer to the perfection, closer to the expectations of your potential customers, and enabling these customers to enhance their trust at all times, because building trust is always an ongoing affair. So this is what.
And SBI is a big name, but it's also a name that's been with us for years and has certainly seen lots of transitions in media. Is there some cultural challenges that you've sort of had to tackle to be able to manage this new system, this new organism, this new playing field?
Yeah, see, challenges are there, and more centric to with SBI, where it has more than 20,000 branches pan India, And all brands associated with SBI, whether SBI mutual funds, general insurance, life insurance, so same set of customers would want to buy a product of SBI. SBI is an umbrella brand. So, and mostly customers who are visiting the branch, they still feel comfortable when they do face-to-face interaction and make a purchase. Now, encouraging them that it is convenient for them as well, once they gain information through various internet mediums, buy online. So, that shift is taking a time. We see that, you know, gaining information from various, you know, social media, or, you know, evaluating reviews and then visiting the branch is perfect, but then the end decision still is not happening online. So, this I see as a challenge, but also very sure that, you know, end-to-end transactions, customers placing trust in the brand and also gaining comfort at the time of eventually closing the deal without physical interaction, but gaining comfort doing online interaction and doing the closure and buying the product and having same trust in the brand is something which will going to happen soon.
On the exchange side, we see that people have gone online very easily, maybe because of the rules, etc. But on the banking side, you being present in the largest number of towns and cities, how have you done any pilot and done any success stories on moving everything online rather than having any branch?
Yeah, so there are certain product categories like travel insurance. So travel insurance is bought online completely. No manual. Even distributors, they sell online. Customers are now habitual of buying it online. I believe it is, you know, shift which is taking place. It is evolving. So entire product range or entire industry is gradually moving towards that. And when I say entire industry, it includes even customers. So a success story clearly is travel insurance, and many insurance companies are now moving towards virtual offices where, you know, customer can experience making a payment, buying product and taking policy there and then. So these things are, you know, getting popularized in the financial services space, and days not far where, you know, like exchange, everything would happen on the terminal for insurance transactions as well.
Especially when you look at the category you're in, and you spoke about travel as a example. Personally, as a consumer, when I buy travel insurance, I probably go online, check a few quotes. What's the cheapest? I probably pick that up. For me personally, for such a category, trust has no relevance, because probably, you know, you're never going to cash in on the insurance either, because it's just something which is a requirement for a visa, for example. So how do you manage actually, and how important then do you think is actually brand trust for such categories?
See, you know, like unlike any tangible product, insurance is nothing but a promise, be it travel insurance or health insurance. And the real test happens, you know, we call it a moment of truth when customer, God forbid, has to make a claim in insurance. So there the whole experience journey starts, the entire service delivery mechanism, timely and amicable claim settlement. So for example, you know, travel insurance. So someone traveling abroad, if something happens, someone has to get hospitalized in a foreign country. So how easy it is made by the insurance ecosystem in terms of making that person identifying the tied up hospital networks abroad, going there, the entire seamless process of getting admitted and getting treatment done and cashless settlement is something, you know, which enables him, and you know, it spreads that this is the most trustworthy brand because everything is getting settled seamlessly. The entire process, the entire you know, interaction in the whole chain. So that you know, is something which defines trust in you know, this product or entire insurance space.
Wonderful. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful having you.
Thank you so much.
My next guest is Venkat Malik, co-founder and chief strategy officer of Tidal 7 Brand and Digital. Venkat is an old friend. Please note I didn't say older. Old friend. He's worked for over 2.5 decades in leading agencies like JWT, Leo Burnett and Euro RSCG, and has managed some very, very great brands through his life, including Unilever, Indian Oil, Ultratech, Smith Climb Beecham and McDonald's. Venkat serves on the board of advisors of one of India's fastest growing digital agencies, which is Langur Digital. Venkat, you and me are the financial product people in this forum.
Yeah.
And we have the opportunity to see this whole challenge from the outside. And my question to you, as you help brands grow, is help us put trust and brands in perspective. Are brands dying because of lack of trust, or are they not relevant? Where does trust fit into this equation?
First, thanks very much for having me here, and it's great to be in the midst of such erudite people. And I actually didn't realize that I was going to be in the midst of so many people from financial services, right? I should have done a little bit more of homework. The perspective that everybody stated is obviously very, very correct, and I agree with everything that everybody said. Most financial services companies need to and look at brand trust as pretty much the whole thing, right? But actually, brand trust, in my view, is also a bit overstated on the internet, especially. In fact, relevance and dynamism are more important for brands to grow and thrive than trust, which I'm defining as an attribute rather than the whole brand play, right? And that's a perspective. Actually, if you look at it, Nokia died not because it got distrusted. It died because it got out-imagined. The same thing with Kodak, and I'm sure there are plenty of other brands that you could sort of talk about. Many of these brands have actually got out-imagined rather than out-trusted, right? Many financial services companies are also facing threat from digitally led payment banks and so on and so forth. Not so much, because I think in financial services, trust, physical realities, etc., matter a lot more than many other categories. But in most categories, companies are getting out-imagined. Platform brands are coming and completely disrupting marketplaces, and well-trusted brands don't know where to look and where to go and how to build and thrive.
I like the word out-imagined, and you've also spoken about relevance.
Yeah.
And trust is not an absolute, but there is also, so there is, I trust the brand, and then there is, I need to trust the decision I'm making right now is the most prudent decision there is to make,
Yeah.
because there's time and there's money involved. So trust also comes in sort of many different
Absolutely.
layers and levels, and there is immediacy and relevance linked to trust in some ways.
Yeah.
Do you think that along with out-imagined, there is also the outgunned, because you don't know what the play on the internet is or with the new consumer is?
Absolutely. In fact, somebody actually raised that. So, I've been studying general insurance recently. And basically what has happened is general insurance, for example, travel insurance gets bought in a matter of 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 1 minute, because very often you encounter travel insurance when you're buying an air ticket, right? You buy what is presented to you, you trust the airline brand, and you don't even know who the whitelisted back-end insurer is, and therefore you're buying it off the trust of the the airline company, and if therefore financial services companies aren't present in such moments, they lose a sale irrespective of how well trusted they are.
There's been some conversation today about the importance of what's not on the internet, humanizing brands, human intervention,
Yeah.
the person you can call, the person you can speak to. Personally, it's very comforting for me as well, and I often
Yeah.
wonder whether who we call the millennial or the Gen Z faces the same dilemmas in their head. So lots of the brick and mortar brands, as they go online,
Yeah.
where do you see that bridge? Because online necessarily sort of brings the attribute of convenience and information, and the ability to not deploy the number of people you do in the brick and mortar world.
Yeah.
And yet there is this dilemma. Where do you fit all of that in? the
Yeah, so
equation?
I think, some of these questions need to be answered for specific categories, because you can't have really a holistic answer which sort of applies to everything around. I think if you look at financial services, while there are digital-only businesses and brands that have been built, I think the larger ones still have a huge brick and mortar play, and that will possibly continue. They all need to be multi-channel, right? Similarly, for example, other forms of retail that we deal with, we find that physical access and contact and just the act of going and shopping physically has a huge role to play, right? We handle a digital retailer, as in digital products retailer. We're finding that people are making a comeback to the store because they're claiming service values, right? I mean, they basically say that if you buy on the internet, you don't know how you're going to get it fixed if it goes wrong, right? And that, for example, consumers are willing to buy. And therefore, in fact, physical retailers are making a comeback through arguments of that kind. But that's because it's a product category where the risk of loss is higher because the purchase value is higher. But if you look at buying groceries, for example, right, chances are the risks are very low, right? In which event, it'll have a different kind of play out from a consumer perspective. Yeah, I mean.
Interesting. Are there any questions for Venkat?
Venkat, you mentioned that
Is that mic working? Somebody check. Yeah.
Venkat, you mentioned there is something different about financial brands because of which the type of physical network that is required is probably going to remain important, brick and mortar. Do you think it is because of some inherent factors in financial services, or it's a process of evolution where someday most of the transactions, even in financial services, might be digital, the way we might have seen, let us say, with Uber and Ola, etc., in one of the industries?
Yeah, no, so totally, it is a process of evolution, and it is already sort of, greater and greater percentages of transactions are happening on the internet already, and you must be obviously seeing that. But I do feel that there will always be, in a country like ours, right, there'll always be the need for that touch and feel thing, right, irrespective. It's also about societies. It'll probably play out differently in a different country. But in our country, it'll probably play out with physical touch and feel being important. So for example, I'll just give you one example. For example, there's this brand called Carrot Lane, right, which is a jewelry brand. They are dominantly online, but a very large part of their sale happens when they send people with 5 sets of jewelry to the consumer's home, and the consumer is able to pick it up from a physical sort of actually transaction, which is it's a very unique Indian context, I think, right? And that will probably stay in our country just because of the kind of people we are.
Venkat, I also seen in share market also, many people come to me saying, can we get a share certificate even though everything is digital?
Totally, yeah.
So it's true that many people don't feel that the money in bank is real.
You can hold it in your hand.
Yes, even the money. Like if I get a salary and I tell my wife, yes, it's in the bank, she don't believe it. You have to get cash. So Indians are still going in cash. Do you feel that will get digital soon?
Yes, totally. I do believe that will sort of keep changing and quite dramatically actually. Yeah.
On that note, Venkat,
thank you
so much. Fantastic insights.
Thank you.
My next guest is Balaji Vaidyanathan, Marketing Director, Franklin Templeton Investments Limited. Balaji is an integrated marketing communication professional with 16 years of experience in building both Indian and global brands. He's one of the early adopters of video storytelling to promote investor education in the online space. In 2018, he was conferred with the title of Marketing Influencer of the Year by DMA Asia. Balaji, we've had lots of conversations today, and it's a no-brainer that trust is an important factor when it comes to financial services and banking. And this obviously holds even more true today when more and more people are opting for digital payments or digital transaction. And some of that is about lifestyle, is about our lives, is about seeking convenience. As consumers, we are very happy about it, but there's lots of questions. And as marketeers, I'm sure that's a challenge. Tell us, in the era where people have begun to transact online and give money and data, how does a financial service brand go about building the trust equation for people to actually do all of that?
So before we talk specifically about financial services brands, I think it's important to talk a little about trust. If like Asha said before, you do a slight Google on brand trust, I think one of the things which actually pops up is brand value. And a lot of marketers, and unfortunately we make the mistake to do so, is to confuse brand value with brand trust. But look at the top companies in the world which have the highest brand value, and in any list which you see, Facebook is in the top 5 with close to $90 billion. But is it one of the most trusted brands in the world? You ask, probably 9 out of 10 would say no, and probably the 10th would probably be Zuckerberg will say yes because he owns the product. So my point here is, a brand can go out building value for itself, but it may not go out necessarily building the brand trust. And I think especially for a financial services brand, trust becomes even more important, because when you look at investments or a category like mutual funds, what am I doing? I'm taking money from him, a consumer, either online or offline, maybe every month through a systematic investment plan, giving him a hope or a dream of a goal which may be 5, 10, or even 20 years away. One of the considerations actually to think about is whether he's buying offline or online, he's at least expecting that some of those goals get close to achievement, which means the inherent trust is, 1, I'll get my money back when I want it, hopefully 2, how much I want, and 3, he has the confidence that the brand is going to be there for those 20, 30 years to actually have him get the money back. In the last couple of years, actually we've seen that transactions online have started improving. Traditionally, mutual funds have always been sold through a distributor. So any point of time, about 90% of sales would have come through a distributor, which could be a bank or an IFA. And hence, when the guy or the consumer walks into any of these outlets, which are not necessarily single brand, but multi-brand outlets, which means if, say, you're going to an HDFC Bank or an Axis Bank, there are a choice of 40 mutual funds to sell. Now, while pricing does play an important part, with the way the new regulations are coming in, pricing is almost getting normalized. That's when brand trust is going to get even more important. So whether offline or online, increasingly consumers are going to see whether they can believe and trust in the brand to be where they want to see them maybe 10, 20, or 30 years down the line to actually see that they will invest with them. 2, I think it's very important to also know that what is trust. And I think it's very closely linked to what transparency is. Look at it this way. If the company in which the consumer is at the end of the day investing in is not very transparent, like in my case, of what it's doing with the money, how it's managing it, the type of portfolios it's constructing for the end client, and being transparent about communicating this back to them in a timely manner, if none of these happen, consumers are not going to look at you very positively. So hence, brand trust becomes a very important part for financial services, whether it's online, whether it's offline, and it's going to continue to remain so.
From your own stable, give us, sorry, from your own stable, give us the 1 or 2 key mantras, which is the do this mantras to build trust.
So as a marketer, the biggest mistake with mutual funds I've always made is they've tried to put performance as the core of the communication. They've always said, come invest with us, we've given you dividends for 25 years, come invest with us, we've given 100% returns, or come invest with us, we're the number 1 rated fund. I don't think that's something which works very well in the long term. Today, consumers are smart. If you look at some of the research out there, 72% of consumers don't believe in ads. And most of those people don't believe in ads when they see them online. Even today, a consumer would prefer to see a print ad and has more trust in that rather than looking online. So I think don't push something which is temporarily like performance or like short-term performance. Look at the long-term promise the brand can make to the consumer, which is to get them to what they're looking at, which is their goals.
Fantastic. We can take one question from the brand masters. Asha has a question, yes.
My question is related to the brand name itself. In a market which is, which has very familiar Indian brand names, what have been your challenges in landing a brand name like yours?
Some things you can control. It's what I say. Some things you can't. Unfortunately, that's the legacy. While in the US, we're very widely respected because you're seeing that face on the $100 bill. In India, it's a challenge. And I must tell you, since you brought this up, one of the first challenges I noticed maybe 9, 10 years back when I'd come in, there was this company which used to do air hostess training a lot, right? Frankfin. And this is a story I've heard which is very true. Around 15 years back, my CEO at that time walks into the hall one morning into the lobby reception, and there's a line of pretty girls at Franklin, very well dressed and very well attired, and he's wondering, wow, mutual fund industry is really growing. And then he goes and asks the reception. They said, and the receptionist told him, everyone's here for an interview, and he didn't understand why. Then he went and asked one of them, and one of them said that, oh no, we've come for this air hostess training Frankfin interview. So that's the challenge of the brand. But we're growing, we're trying to get it more popular. I think what we're trying to do to address the challenge specifically in the last few years is, the name does matter, but it's also the promise. And today, we're going out with a brand message over the last year or so with a brand message called Reach for Better. And I think Franklin Templeton, with his brand message of Reach for Better, is the promise and the brand trust we are trying to build within all people. We've done a lot of research around this. People who don't know us, don't know us. I mean, we are not even heard of, whether it's an SBI, whether it's an HDFC, whether it's an ICICI, obviously they have the advantage of umbrella brands. But people who've invested with us, or people who have heard of us or know us, hold us in very high regard. So our challenge as a brand is to just make sure that little number of people who've invested with us keeps growing over time, so that more and more people can get comfortable with us. And that's a constant ongoing challenge.
We need to close that here, but thank you so much. That was very sharp and very, very well done.
Thank you
so much. I'd like to invite now Rajiv Bansal, CEO of HT Digital Streams, to delve further into this topic. Rajiv, you worked across internet companies and consumer products, and I know we deal with the trust issue all the time. So given your journey and now your journey into news tech, talk to us a little bit about building trust, keeping trust, and using trust to actually build loyalty.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a consumer internet angle on this. When you think about building successful businesses on the consumer internet, right? You have acquisition funnels, you have engagement funnels, and then you have finally monetization. So we're in the news business, and it is incredibly important for us to win the acquisition funnel, because otherwise consumers don't come and consume our content. So as opposed to our print newspapers, our digital teams have to win every edition, every second, and every minute, because the nature of traffic exponentially changes if you're late by a few seconds or a few minutes. So we have that, which is the timeliness question. But the important thing is, the middle and the bottom parts of the funnel, which is engagement and which is monetization. So we know that people who choose us as a trusted brand, who are primary consumers of our news, engage with us more than 10x more compared to people who just come to us randomly through a Google or Facebook or finding us through some other search engine. And in doing that, we need to really measure up to the bar of trust. So that's super important for us. And then on the monetization front, we're talking to a bunch of companies in the financial services space. You don't want to associate with brands that are not trusted, because consumers need to trust you with very, very deep sources of information. So that's sort of where the core focus of our business has been. And then that brings us to why and how, how do you go on this journey of building trust? And in our case, with HT, it's been 2 years now that I've been at HT. And it all starts with the organization. So we were having some conversations about some of the organizational challenges. Certainly, we've started with some really, really impactful brands, right? We've got some of India's most trusted brands in our kitty with the Hindustan Times and like, but we're also a 100-year-old company. So it really started for us with building a lot of foundational trust in the organization itself, and that came through expertise. So we ended up building organizationally, probably cross-functionally, the strongest team in media, spanning all the way from our editorial teams to our technology teams to our user experience, design teams, product teams, data teams, and so on and so forth.
So trust equals engagement equals bottom of the pyramid. Do you feel that trust is therefore the most critical element in building loyalty?
In the news category, definitely. So I referenced a little bit of, primary consumers of news versus secondary consumers of news. So one of the first things I did when I came to HT was we actually did consumer research. And the consumer research, we found that, people have choices. There are websites or apps that people go to automatically. And all of us have them. We all have our choices. We make over time, and we're consistent in those choices. So you hear about an India-Australia match, or you hear about Pulwama, you're going to type in or go to the browser bookmark almost immediately. So that's where you're a primary consumer of that source of news. Now, that source of news is talking to you the way you want to be talked to. So the grammar is right, the nuance is right, and most importantly, it's news that can be trusted. So when you become a primary consumer of news, we found that you're giving us more than 10x engagement. So when you're giving us more than 10x engagement, that's what I can build a viable business on. So one of the reasons why we were able to build a profitable business in digital media, which a lot of people have struggled with, is because we focus on those primary consumers, and that really comes down to the core principles of trust and consistency.
The whole world right now operates on the breaking news, right? Breaking news is very often, sometimes it's even fictional. I mean, I'm just saying, right? Nobody's really particularly concerned about whether it was 42 people who died or 48 people who died, right? Getting it right, nailing it to the 42 would be, a matter of trust or whatever. We broadly know that this has happened. For example, if there is a terrorist attack or if there's a scandal, that something random happened, you read about it. You're not really over sort of engaging with it as an individual, right? And trying to figure out whether it's actually completely accurate or not, because it doesn't impact your life that much, right? And you're not making a decision on the basis of that, for which you would need trust, right? Financial services, I understand that I would make a financial decision and therefore trust is crucial. But over here, I would probably hear the same thing through 3 different sources and I'll have a sort of broad view of it. So does trust really play a role?
Let me give you a couple of
Or
perspectives.
excitement is more important. Yeah.
So first of all, when you think about, so let's talk about what are consumers today experiencing in terms of information, right? So I sit in India's second biggest media company. My social media team is 1/200th the size of major politicians' social media teams. And in some cases, major business people's social media teams or celebrity social media teams. What a lot of these teams are doing is they're creating a lot of information. Today, elections are won and lost on the basis of a few basis points, and that comes from moving opinion. So a lot of these teams are creating either biased information or they're creating information that's downright fake. So from an average consumer's perspective, it's not a question of whether it's 42 people who died or 48 people who died. It's a question of whether the attack even took place. When we're talking about Pulwama, for example, there were all of these theories floating about. If you saw the BBC versus the Dawn versus Indian mainstream media, they were completely different reporting on what happened with the airstrikes, and so on and so forth. So as an average consumer, they are facing a huge trust deficit in their information sources. And when we're talking about building a global media internet brand, which is what we aspire to do, you really have to go and solve that problem. A consumer should not have a different lens on information, which is news information, based on what's the source they're getting it from. And I think that's where there's a humongous problem. It's a bigger problem than we've ever had in human history because of the access of communication and information that is today available. Let me give you one more slice on it, and then we'll sort of cut. When you think about how people are encountering information, so when we did our user research, we found that while people encounter a lot of information around news on a Facebook or a WhatsApp, they have almost zero trust in it. Because the reasons why they're going to these platforms is entirely different. Facebook is a platform where people are going to engage with their friends and families and communities, and that's their primary goal. So now if they're given some news as a result of being there, they're going to consume it. But they don't trust Facebook as a source of news. It's really the news brands that they trust as a source of news. So if Hindustan Times is on Facebook, they trust it. WhatsApp, similarly, is a communication mechanism. So it's for one-to-one or group communication. And I guess I'm probably a fairly annoying child, but my mom will forward me stuff on WhatsApp, and I'll ask her, why are you forwarding me this? This seems downright fake. And she'll say, well, I got a forward, so I forwarded it along. And when people encounter this information on platforms like WhatsApp, they actually go and read the URL. They read the link source. Then they click on it. to see if this is actually the Hindustan Times or Times of India or is a different website. Sometimes they're still not convinced because they are scared about things like phishing. So then they go and actually go into a URL and type the URL of the trusted news provider that they trust. And that's where trust really plays a really, really important role.
Fantastic. Big global media empire, music to the ears. And on that wonderful note, I'd like to thank you all. But before I do, uh, just just summarizing some thoughts from today, and we've heard lots of wonderful thoughts. You know, humanizing the proposition, actions speak louder than words, benefit of doubt to the customer. The one thing we've been sure of, though, is that trust is a necessary ingredient, even if it's not the only ingredient, or if it's not sufficient to actually propel brands. But without trust, there is very little way forward. Uh, as sort of the internet becomes fiercer and competition grows, and uh, this there's loads of information and misinformation. My sense is trust can make or break businesses, and misinformation can certainly break stuff. Hopefully, information can do the opposite, and it can make brands and businesses in the future. Brands need to consistently invest in reputation management, not just keeping tabs on customer expectations, but by remaining authentic. And I think we've heard lots around authenticity today as well. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on episode 8 of Brand Studio Live, co hosted by the HD Brand Studio and DMA Asia. A very special thanks to DMA Asia and Vatsal Ashar for powering this wonderful event. A big round of applause for the brand masters today, and to you, Rajiv, who took out time and shared insights and lots of experiences. A big thank you to Fever FM, who helps us take this forward. And really a round of applause to BSC for hosting us. This really is haloed grounds, and we're just so excited to be here. Uh, Thank you for tuning in. We look forward to coming back with the next episode and another set of Brand Masters. Thank you.